As soon as the gavel struck the desk, an unsettling feeling washed over me. Perhaps it was the heavy silence that followed, or the way Judge Grayson's gaze seemed to linger on me just a tad too long. My name is Aubrey, I'm 31, and that day in court was meant to be just another ordinary outing. Instead, it turned into the moment the entire illusion my family had crafted started to come apart. The moment I stepped in, my mother shot me an exaggerated eye roll, not one of those subtle ones, but an overt expression that screamed, "Oh great, here we go again." It felt as if I was just a nuisance in her meticulously performed victim narrative. Then, Judge Grayson unexpectedly paused. His eyes darted from the documents to my face, where I witnessed the heavy realization strike him like a speeding train. "Hold on," he remarked slowly, putting down his pen. "These accusations are pointed at you?" My parents were utterly oblivious to my true self. And you know what? That was the best part of it all. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by your own family, because you definitely want to hear what comes next. Let's rewind 3 months. My grandfather, Judge Thomas Ellison, had just passed away. With 4 decades on the Supreme Court, he was practically an icon. More importantly, he was the person who raised me while my parents were too busy chasing their own dreams, acting as if I didn't even exist. His funeral was grand. Every judge, lawyer, and politician in the state showed up. I stood before everyone to deliver the eulogy. My parents? They snuck in through the back, arrived late, and vanished before the reception even started. Classic behavior from Margaret and Scott Morrison. I hadn't laid eyes on them in over a decade, not since my 18th birthday, when my grandmother passed away. They only popped by for a mere 90 minutes before disappearing again. After Grandma Helen's departure, it was just Grandpa and me. He was 73, still sharp as a tack and determined to ensure I had every opportunity possible. Here's the thing about my parents. My mother became pregnant at 18 and decided that being a mom cramped her lifestyle. My father, a once promising hockey player with big ambitions, found that a baby just didn't fit into their plans, so they made a selfish choice. They dropped me off at my grandparents' home when I was merely 3 months old and essentially vanished. Sure, they made an appearance twice a year if luck was on my side, Christmas and possibly my birthday. Margaret would show up dressed in high-end clothes, air-kissing near my cheek, while spending the entire visit criticizing how Grandma was raising me. Apparently, she thought it was too lenient. Meanwhile, Scott completely avoided these visits because Grandpa called him out for his laziness. So, I'd settle for watching my father on television instead. Every time the Bruins played, Grandpa would turn on the game, not because he cared about hockey, but so I could know my father existed somewhere, even if he chose to be absent from my life. Oddly enough, I never felt deprived. Grandma Helen and Grandpa William showered me with genuine love, the kind that truly matters. They attended every school play, soccer match, and debate competition. They filled the parental roles in all the ways that count. When Grandma died unexpectedly from a stroke, I thought everything had fallen apart. I was 18, on the brink of starting college, and the woman who had raised me was suddenly gone. Grandpa guided us both through our shared grief, and in the midst of that darkness, he began opening up about his profession, about justice, and the importance of wielding power responsibly. That's when I decided to follow his path. I graduated at the top of my law school class, with Grandpa beaming at my accomplishment. My parents? They sent a card. Grandpa used his clout to help me land a job as a prosecutor. I quickly climbed the ranks because it turned out I was exceptionally skilled at it. By the time I hit 30, I was tackling high-profile cases involving complex financial crimes and corruption, the sort that made headlines. My parents, clueless, probably thought I was coasting in some dull office job if they thought of me at all. Grandpa retired when I was 27, saying he had done his part. But in truth, he wanted to savor our time together while he could. We shared dinner every Sunday, a sacred tradition. He taught me everything about reading people, courtroom strategies, and maintaining integrity when the world around you becomes compromised. When he passed away at 87, peacefully in his sleep, I felt that familiar void return. But this time, I wasn't a lost teenager. I was a 31-year-old who had become exactly who he'd raised me to be. The will reading took place a week later. I anticipated a few books, his watch, personal mementos, but what I received was monumental. The house, investment portfolio, savings, life insurance, a whopping $3 million. Everything he had tirelessly built, he entrusted to me, accompanied by one very specific provision in a sealed letter. My beloved Aubrey, it began. You are reading this because I am no longer here. Yet, my love for you remains constant. You are the greatest joy of my life. I bequeath you everything because you truly deserve it, not out of blood, for you are my blood, but because you consistently showed up, loving me and your grandmother when others could not even be bothered. Long ago, your parents made their choice. Now, I'm making mine. Stay strong, sweetheart. Reading that brought tears to my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of validation. The attorney handed me another envelope filled with documentation. It contained bank statements revealing that my grandfather had been giving Margaret a whopping $3,000 each month since my infancy, totaling over $800,000 for more than 20 years. There were emails from her asking for further funds, texts promising visits that were later canceled, and letters from Scott asking for cash for his failed business endeavors. It was a clear trail exposing their neglect and greed. Your grandfather foresaw that they might challenge this, and the attorney noted he wanted you prepared with solid proof. What a clever man. Just 30 days later, however, my attorney called with unexpected news. Margaret and Scott had initiated a lawsuit claiming undue influence, arguing my grandfather was incapable and that I had manipulated him, insisting they deserved a cut of the pie. I couldn't help but laugh. I was actually in court pursuing a securities fraud case when the news hit me. The irony was rich. They thought I was still that forsaken infant, easy to intimidate. They had no clue that I had spent the past decade prosecuting folks who presumed they were untouchable. They didn't realize their father-in-law had prepped me perfectly for this showdown. And they certainly had no idea who Judge Marcus Grayson was. Now, back in that courtroom, the moment was electric. Judge Grayson had once been my grandfather's clerk 23 years ago before stepping into his role as a judge. He recognized me immediately, fully aware of my position as a senior prosecutor, my deep connection to my grandfather, and the fact that the people suing me were the same ones who couldn't find time to visit a dying man. My mother's attorney, a guy named Richard Palmer known for exploiting emotional angles when the facts fell short, piped up. Your Honor, before we proceed, I must disclose my professional relationship with Judge Ellington. If either side objects to me overseeing this case, now's the time to speak up. I watched Palmer and my parents exchange frantic whispers. Margaret looked anxious while Scott wore a scowl. Finally, Palmer stood and declared, "No objection, Your Honor." A grave mistake. Judge Grayson nodded in acknowledgement. Then let's move forward, Mr. Palmer, it's your turn for the opening statement. Things were about to get exhilarating. Growing up in my grandparents' home felt like being in a wholly different universe compared to the world my parents inhabited, and honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. My earliest memory dates back to when I was 4, standing on a stool in Grandma's kitchen, whipping up chocolate chip cookies. She let me dump in an outrageous amount of chocolate chips and never showed a hint of frustration. She just laughed, saying, "The best cookies overflow with love and chocolate." Grandpa would often come home still clad in his robes, scoop me up with flowers in my hair, and ask about my day as if I were the most enchanting person on the planet. I'd excitedly share tales of ants I discovered or a picture I'd drawn, and he'd listen intently, as if I were arguing before the Supreme Court. They never spoke ill of my parents to me, not once. When I asked why Mommy and Daddy weren't living with us, Grandma would say they were tied up with important matters. I believed that for years. Kids trust what they're told, especially when kindness accompanies those words. But I wasn't naive. I noticed how other kids' parents attended school events while mine didn't. I heard friends brag about family game nights while I was stuck with folks who turned in early. Birthday cards from Margaret and Scott arrived long after the occasion, with cookie-cutter sentiments that could have been meant for anyone. The moment I truly grasped that something was amiss hit me at 7 during a Christmas concert. I had a solo featuring 3 lines in Rudolph, rehearsing for weeks. My grandparents sat in the front row, Grandpa with his video camera, Grandma holding flowers from her garden. After the concert, I saw my friend Emma with both her parents taking selfies and hugging. I turned to my grandparents, asking why Mommy and Daddy didn't come. I saw Grandma's face try to smile, but her eyes reflected sadness. They wished they could, sweetheart. They just couldn't make it this time. But I remembered her on the phone the week before, chatting with Margaret about the concert, and the deafening silence followed by an excuse involving Scott's team holiday party. After that, I stopped asking. Grandpa introduced me to chess when I turned 8, and we spent Sunday afternoons strategizing at the board. He taught me to think 3 moves ahead and never let me win, which irked me at first. But when I finally beat him fairly at 12, his pride made him call everyone he knew to share the news. Grandma showed me the joys of gardening in our own patch of the yard, growing tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and flowers. She demonstrated how to tell when the soil needed watering, teaching me that patience and consistent care resulted in beautiful rewards. It dawned on me later that she was imparting lessons about life, not just plants. They attended every soccer game, every dance recital, every debate tournament. Grandpa made sure to set aside his schedule, no matter what case he was dealing with. Grandma would whip up fancy snacks and create signs adorned with my name. They cheered louder than any other parents in the stands. I used to feel embarrassed by their boundless enthusiasm, but now, I would do anything to hear Grandpa's spirited voice echoing from the sidelines just one more time. Meanwhile, Margaret and Scott made their obligatory visits, like clockwork, twice a year. Occasionally, they would arrive with extravagant gifts that felt more like duties fulfilled rather than thoughtful gestures, designer clothes I'd never wear and gadgets I didn't need, communication that simply screamed monetary obligation over genuine care. I clearly remember a particular Christmas when I was 10. Margaret showed up donning a fur coat and sporting diamond earrings, glued to her phone the entire time. Barely looking at me. She handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a tablet. I already had one from Grandpa. When I attempted to tell her, she merely waved me off, saying, "Well, now you've got 2. Share one with a friend." Whatever. Grandma caught my eye from across the room. I could see her jaw clench, yet she remained silent. She approached me, wrapped her arm around my shoulders, and suggested we go check on the cookies. Once in the kitchen, she embraced me tightly, showing me love in her own way. Some show their affection with gifts, while others do so by being present. Both methods are valid, but one holds deeper significance. Scott was even worse than Margaret. He would linger in the car honking until Margaret finally came out. During the rare occasions that Grandpa managed to coax him inside, it felt like the air was thick with tension. Clearly, Grandpa held no respect for him, and Scott was acutely aware of it. I can still remember being 12, overhearing their argument after Scott had dropped Margaret off. Grandpa met him at the door and said, in a quiet tone laced with genuine anger, "One day, that girl will grow up, and she's going to remember who stood by her side. You still have a chance to change how she remembers you." Scott responded with a laugh, a real laugh. "Save the lecture, Your Honor. Margaret and I are managing just fine. Aubrey is well taken care of. That's all that matters." "Provided for?" Grandpa echoed slowly, as if in disbelief. "Is that your definition of parenting? Writing checks? It goes beyond what you did for Margaret." Scott retorted, and that was a misstep. Grandpa's expression hardened. "I raised my daughter. I was at every game, every recital, every single moment. She chose to abandon her responsibilities. Don't you dare imply that I'm the one who failed." After that, Scott left, never attempting to step foot inside again. As I aged, those visits grew even more strained. Margaret began to come alone more often, while Scott was consumed with his unsuccessful business ventures, too busy to see his only child. By 15, I had stopped caring. I accepted reality. They were not my parents, just people whose DNA I shared. Academically, I excelled. Really excelled. Grandpa scrutinized my report cards as if they were legal briefs from the Supreme Court. Earning straight A's meant dinner at my favorite restaurant, and winning debate competitions led to trips to Washington to witness oral arguments in person. He made education feel so invaluable. When I got into Boston University with a full academic scholarship, Grandma shed tears of joy. Margaret sent a text, "Good job." Just 2 words, that was all. College was the first time I was away from my grandparents. Each Sunday without exception, I called them. Grandma would share tales about her garden, the neighbors, and other mundane but meaningful details because she took the time to share. Grandpa would inquire about my classes, teachers, and whether I felt challenged. In my sophomore year, Grandma suffered a massive and sudden stroke while planting tulip bulbs. A neighbor found her. I received the tragic call from Grandpa while in class. His voice was fragile, shattered. "She's gone, Aubrey. She's gone." I drove home that night, 6 straight hours of tears. Upon arriving, I found Grandpa sitting in the garden darkness, clutching the tulip bulbs she had not finished planting. I settled beside him, and we shared a silent vigil until sunrise. Margaret and Scott attended the funeral, but swiftly departed afterward, offering no help with arrangements or sorting through Grandma's belongings. They merely appeared long enough to be seen before vanishing again. That was when I stopped making excuses for them, realizing that some people are inherently selfish. Grandpa and I learned to navigate life without her. It wasn't the same, never would be. Yet, we still had one another. Those Sunday dinners became sacred moments. Occasionally he would cook, typically grilled cheese. Other times, I would experiment with Grandma's cherished recipes, or we would order pizza and enjoy it right from the box while watching old films. The true treasure wasn't the food itself, it was the rich conversations we shared. He began to open up about his work more than ever before, discussing cases that troubled him, choices that kept him awake at night, and the heavy knowledge that his rulings could alter someone's entire life. "The law is meant to be blind," he stated during one Sunday evening over Chinese takeout. However, the individuals interpreting all this certainly aren't. We infuse our choices with personal experiences, biases, and our very humanity. The challenge lies in recognizing when your humanity drives you toward fairness and when it leads to prejudice. I absorbed every word he shared. "You're destined to be a judge one day," he said when I was merely 23, struggling to keep pace in law school. Yet he was serious. "You possess an innate quality that can't be taught, integrity. The capability to discern right from wrong, even when it's challenging or comes at a cost." After Grandma passed away, something significant shifted in my connection with Grandpa. We transformed into allies in resilience, 2 individuals who grasped loss and chose to bear it together rather than separately. The house felt more vacant without her, yet it never felt lonely. We filled it with shared memories and dialogues, an unspoken agreement that we were all each other had. Law school was grueling, but I had a great passion for it. Every late-night study session, every mock trial, every moment I contemplated giving up, I thought about Grandpa and the legacy he was crafting, not solely in courtrooms but also within me. I graduated summa cum laude. He was there in the front row, capturing every moment on video. My parents didn't show up, they sent a card instead. I had stopped being surprised by their absence many years ago. Securing the prosecutor role right after graduating law school was largely thanks to Grandpa, though I was oblivious to this at the time. I assumed I had earned it solely through hard work, solid recommendations, good grades, and an impressive interview. Later on, I learned he had made calls on my behalf and personally vouched for me, ensuring that I wouldn't squander the chance. I didn't let him down. I poured my heart into that job, showing up early, staying late, and taking on cases that other prosecutors shunned due to their complexity or political implications. By my second year, I was already handling significant cases, like financial fraud, political corruption, and intricate white-collar crime, which required weeks of document analysis. I quickly built a reputation, fast, meticulous, well-prepared, and relentless. The work consumed me entirely. Weeks of 70 hours became the norm. My diet consisted of coffee and takeout, accompanied by the satisfaction of seeing guilty parties face justice. I had no personal life, no dating, no happy hour with colleagues, nothing but work and treasured Sunday dinners with Grandpa. Those dinners were sacrosanct. No matter how tired I was, I showed up, and he never missed one either, even in his 80s when he moved at a slower pace. During this period, Margaret reached out once. I was 28 and hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. She asked for help with a legal issue involving Scott. I inquired how she acquired my number. She claimed Grandpa had given it to her. Mental note to discuss boundaries. I told her I was a criminal prosecutor, not a civil attorney, and made it clear that I wouldn't assist Scott with anything. She labeled me ungrateful. I hung up. Later, Grandpa apologized. Margaret had cornered me, crying about how her daughter wouldn't talk to her. I should have been wiser. I wasn't upset. Margaret was always well-versed in manipulation. It's all right, but please refrain from sharing any more information regarding my life. She forfeited the right to know a long time ago. When I turned 30, Grandpa organized a small birthday celebration at home, inviting only his closest friends, people from my childhood. Judge Marcus Grayson was among them, having been Grandpa's clerk 23 years prior and later becoming an esteemed judge. We chatted extensively that night about the law, intriguing cases, and the importance of maintaining ethics in a system often favoring compromise. Your grandfather speaks of you constantly, he told me. He's immensely proud of what you've accomplished. My throat tightened at this. Grandpa seldom directly expressed pride toward me, but knowing he shared that with others meant everything. They saved me, I whispered. Him and my grandmother. They provided for me in every way possible. Judge Grayson nodded, recounting my parents' departure and expressing sympathy for my experience. Don't feel sorry for me, I replied. Had they raised me? I might have been an entirely different person, not necessarily a better one. Reflecting on it, I don't think I fully grasped the magnitude of Grandpa's sacrifices to provide for me. He was 55 when I took up permanent residence with him, at an age when most people consider a more relaxed future. Instead, he found himself with an infant, then a toddler, and ultimately a moody teenager. He never complained, he simply showed up every single day and loved me fiercely. Margaret held resentment toward him for that, I know she did. She perceived our bond as a threat, as if Grandpa's affection for me diminished his love for her. She never comprehended that love doesn't operate that way. There's no need to choose, you can love both your daughter and your granddaughter. You can feel disappointment in one while taking pride in the other. Yet Margaret had to be the victim in every narrative, having lost her parents at 8, leading to her being sent away. Pregnant at a young age constrained her, and leaving me with her parents meant she was unjustly treated. None of it was ever her fault, it was always someone else's shortcomings that dictated her path. Back when I was younger, I used to have a lot of sympathy for her, clinging to the hope that she might turn into the mother I'd always dreamed of. But around the age of 25, that feeling of pity transformed into an understanding that she was simply who she was. She wasn't going to change, nor did I need her to. My grandpa retired when I was 27, after an impressive 40 years on the bench. It was a monumental occasion. There were news stories, retirement parties, and accolades from every legal organization in the state. He accepted it all with grace, but I sensed he was ready for a change. Ready to let go of carrying the weight of others' problems. ready to just enjoy life instead of being a symbol of authority. We dreamt about traveling to places like Italy, Ireland, and Alaska. He had a bucket list penned down, but slowly, I noticed his health was deteriorating. It wasn't anything sudden. After 82 years, fatigue, aches, and slower movements had started to take their toll. He never complained, but I began visiting him more frequently, not just on Sundays, but also during the week. I'd bring dinners and ensure he took his meds. Initially, he resisted, claiming I was treating him like he was feeble, yet deep down, I knew he appreciated it. The house felt so empty without Grandma and without a job to occupy his days. He longed for companionship. We spent countless evenings discussing everything and anything: politics, old cases, mutual acquaintances. Sometimes, we would simply sit together in ease, he with his book and me combing through case files. Just sharing space felt comforting. One night, he looked at me and said, "Raising you has been the greatest privilege of my life." I paused, glancing up from my notes to find his gaze soft and nostalgic. He elaborated, saying that he and Grandma had the joy of being parents twice, first with Margaret and then with me. He stated that the second time was even better, perhaps because they were older and wiser, or maybe because I was an exceptional kid who was a joy to love. Tears welled up in my eyes. "You and Grandma were my lifeline. I can't fathom where I'd be without your support." In response, he shook his head, saying, "We didn't save you, Aubrey. We just loved you. You found your own path despite all the chaos. That was all you." Those discussions are what I cherish most, feeling utterly understood and entirely accepted, with someone who believed in me without reservation. Not many get to experience that even once, but I had it twice. Whenever Margaret happened to call him, he was always polite, never criticizing her in front of me. Yet, I could sense his disappointment after those conversations, the sorrow at seeing his daughter become a stranger who only reached out when she needed something, typically money. Each time, he gave it to her, not because she earned it, but because, as her father, he couldn't turn his back. I once asked him why he kept financially supporting her, pointing out how she squandered it. His response was a deep sigh, "I know, but she's still my daughter. I hold on to the hope that one day she will understand what truly matters. It's not the money, Aubrey, it's the hope." Have you ever encountered someone who exploited familial generosity without giving back? How did you approach it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Palmer's opening remarks were nothing short of brilliance in storytelling. I've dealt with enough deceitful individuals in court to recognize true talent when I see it. He skillfully painted Margaret as a dedicated daughter, wrongly estranged from her loving father, claiming that manipulative grandparents damaged their bond. Meanwhile, he depicted me as a schemer, isolating an elderly man to present myself as his only caretaker for the sake of securing an inheritance. Judge Ellington was grappling with profound grief after losing his wife of 6 decades. Palmer's argument oozed false sympathy as he claimed the judge was fragile, depressed, and that I exploited his vulnerability. He argued that I made him feel that I was the only one who cared about him. This doesn't express Judge Ellington's true intentions. It's proof of Aubrey Morrison's calculated strategy to seize his wealth. I maintained a calm exterior, but inwardly, I was noting every misrepresentation for the upcoming cross-examination. Thomas stood for our initial statement, needing no theatrics. The facts were potent enough. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward." Judge Ellington was intelligent, thoughtful, and deliberate. He entrusted his estate to the person who truly deserved it after 31 years of consistent love and presence. The evidence will reveal that the plaintiffs received over $800,000 from him during his lifetime with barely any contact while Aubrey Morrison was there every single day. Judge Grayson glanced at Palmer. "Present your first witness." The plaintiff calls Margaret Morrison. My mother adjusted her conservative black dress, having dressed for pity. With minimal makeup and her hair pulled back, she adorned the appearance of a mourning daughter, almost convincing if one were unaware of the truth. After swearing an oath, she took her seat. Palmer approached her with feigned kindness. Mrs. Morrison, can you describe your relationship with your father? Margaret's voice quivered as she began. He meant the world to me, my absolute champion. After my parents tragically passed away in a car crash when I was just 8, he and my grandmother welcomed me into their home, raising me like family. That's all true. But there were some key details being overlooked. When you had Aubrey, what role did your father play? With tearful eyes, Margaret replied, he was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. Where did that tissue come from? Was she holding it just for this moment? He genuinely wanted to assist. I was so young, only 18, still navigating my way through life. When he suggested taking care of Aubrey while Scott and I got on our feet, I thought it was a short-term arrangement. Just a temporary fix. Quite the interesting twist. Palmer nodded in sympathy. But it ended up being permanent. Yes, Margaret's voice cracked. They kept her. They made it look like Scott and I were neglectful parents for wanting to pursue our careers. I felt guilty every time I couldn't make it over to see her. They turned her against me. I maintained my blank expression, but internally, I was dissecting her every word. Thomas shot me a glance, and I gave a tiny nod. I was okay. Let her dig her own hole deeper. After your mother passed away, did your connection with your father change? Palmer pressed. He withdrew, Margaret explained. He became emotionally distant and somehow blamed me for not being around enough. But I really tried. I called and visited whenever possible. He distanced himself while holding Aubrey closer. Judge Grayson was taking notes, his expression unreadable. When did you find out about the will? Palmer asked. It was after the funeral, Margaret recalled. I was heartbroken, and then I discovered he had left me nothing. He had stopped the monthly support he was giving me and bequeathed everything to Aubrey. It felt like the ultimate rejection. Palmer turned to the judge, stating, "We contend that Judge Ellington was unfairly influenced by the defendant, who isolated and manipulated him during his vulnerable times. This will does not reflect his true intentions." Thomas stood up immediately, objecting. Counselor is now testifying. Sustained, Judge Grayson declared. Please stick to asking questions, Mr. Palmer. No further inquiries. Judge Grayson then nodded to Thomas for cross-examination. Yes, Your Honor, Thomas replied as he approached my mother. His demeanor cool, professional, and lethal. Mrs. Morrison, you were 18 when Aubrey was born, correct? Yes, she confirmed. And you willingly left her in the care of your parents when she was just 3 months old? It wasn't just a simple yes or no. Yes, but... Thank you, Thomas cut her off, pulling out a large calendar. Your father kept detailed records. According to these notes, you visited only 4 times during Aubrey's first year, Christmas, Easter, her first birthday, and 1 random Saturday in July. Is that right? Accurate, Margaret admitted, her face reddening. I was juggling a lot. I was young, you know, trying to support Scott's career. Of course. Now, let's delve into that. Your husband was a professional hockey player with a lucrative income, correct? Yes, she replied. Tax records indicate he earned over $2 million during his career, yet you needed ongoing financial help from your father? We had expenses. Expenses that even $2 million couldn't cover. Thomas presented bank statements. Your father provided you with $3,000 each month starting when Aubrey was a baby, continuing for over 20 years. That totals over $800,000, Mrs. Morrison. What did you spend that on? Palmer interjected objection. What's the relevance? The plaintiffs argue they deserve a part of the estate. I'm establishing what they have already received, Thomas insisted. Overruled. Answer the question, the judge ordered. Margaret shifted in discomfort. It was for living expenses, rent, food, the usual. Did you hold a job during all this? Thomas asked. Occasionally, just retail jobs, she responded. And your husband? He tried launching several businesses after hockey ended. Tried? Thomas echoed. Including a sports bar that lasted 11 months, a coaching company with 0 clients, and a memorabilia store that went bankrupt within 2 years. Each time a venture failed, your father provided additional funds beyond your monthly allowance, right? Correct. He wanted to help, Margaret said weakly. He aimed to help you gain independence, Thomas argued. Yet you became reliant instead. In the last decade of his life, how many times did you actually see him? I'm not sure. It was several times, Margaret said, but Thomas presented another document. His calendar shows you only visited 8 times over 10 years, less than once a year. And you call this devoted daughter behavior? I was busy. I had my own life. Margaret protested. Your own life? Thomas asked, echoing her words. Did that entail calling him on his birthday? Silence fell. I'll take that as a no. What about Father's Day, Christmas, cards, or gifts? Sometimes. She whispered. Sometimes, Mrs. Morrison, when was the last time you saw your father before his passing? A long silence ensued. I can't remember the exact moment. It was his 84th birthday, 3 years before his death. You spent 90 minutes with him, then left before cake. You didn't see him again until the funeral, correct? I suppose that's true, yes, she admitted. Thomas let her words resonate. One last question. You stated your father pushed you away after your mother died, but isn't it accurate that you stopped visiting when he ceased offering extra funds beyond the monthly allowance? That's when he retired, stating monthly payments would continue but no more additional funds would be given. You haven't shown up even once in those last 3 years. Is that true or false? He was visibly upset with me. Or maybe you just didn't care about him anymore, Thomas whispered. No more inquiries. Next up was Scott, who somehow managed to appear even more disinterested than he normally does. He shifted uncomfortably in his suit like a child dragged to church. Palmer kicked things off with easy questions. Mr. Morrison, could you outline your relationship with Judge Ellington? We got along just fine, Scott replied, but what that really meant was that they put up with each other for roughly 90 seconds at a time. They hardly saw each other due to Scott's hockey commitments and all that travel, yet he claimed he respected him, quite a statement from someone who'd steered clear of the man's home for 2 decades. Palmer guided him back into the same narrative of victimhood. They attempted to participate, but Grandpa made it tough, leaving them feeling excluded. Scott appeared less credible than Margaret and kept sneaking peeks at the clock, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else. His irritation was evident to everyone. Thomas's examination was meticulous. Mr. Morrison, you stated that you wished to be present in Aubrey's life. Is that correct? Yes. And how many of her school events did you actually attend? Scott hesitated. I'm not sure. Several. Can you name a single one? Silence filled the room. Scott shot a look at Palmer, who was of no assistance. I was traveling quite a bit. Your hockey career wrapped up when Aubrey was 8. After that, you resided 2 hours away. How often did you visit her? We had visits. How many visits? Thomas pressed further. I'm not certain. Can you believe that, according to Aubrey, you stepped inside Judge Ellington's home fewer than 5 times over 24 years and mainly stayed in your car? Scott clenched his jaw. That house was filled with tension. Judge Ellington didn't have a liking for me. And why was that? I'm not sure. He was judgmental. Or, as Thomas interjected, perhaps he judged you for leaving your daughter and then turning to him for monetary help when your businesses collapsed. Let's delve into those failures. 3 ventures, 3 bankruptcies. Each time, you sought financial assistance from Judge Ellington, correct? He offered help after my request, Thomas interrupted. And he still provided you with funds despite hardly being able to tolerate your presence. Why was that? It was because he loved his daughter. And wanted to support her, even when she wed someone he disdained, even when that individual never showed up for his granddaughter. And now, you're asserting you're entitled to more? Scott's expression soured. We're family. We deserve something. Family, Thomas repeated slowly. Did you attend Aubrey's high school graduation? I think so. Think so? Thomas displayed a photograph on the screen. Here's her graduation. Judge Ellington is front and center. There's her grandmother. Where are you, Mr. Morrison? I might have been around. You didn't show. You missed her college graduation, law school graduation, every significant milestone, and you're now expecting half of the estate earned by the man who actually made an effort? Palmer interjected. Objection. That's argumentative. Sustained, Judge Grayson responded. Let's move on. Thomas nodded. No further questions. Palmer then presented a witness that caught me off guard, Dr. Raymond Hughes, a psychiatrist who had never crossed paths with Grandpa. They were daringly employing the incompetence argument, a bold choice given the numerous witnesses who could counterspeak. Dr. Hughes, regarding the medical records, could you comment on Judge Ellington's mental health in his last year? According to the records, Judge Ellington exhibited signs of depression following his wife's passing. Depression in elderly patients can impair judgment, particularly in relational dynamics and financial choices. So, he might have been easily influenced? That is a possibility. Elders suffering from grief-related depression often become susceptible to influence, especially from caregivers they see frequently. Thomas stood up for cross-examination. Dr. Hughes, you never met Judge Ellington? Correct. You never assessed him, communicated with him, or observed him in any setting. I'm basing my insights on medical records. Those records show standard checkups with normal results for his age, correct? Yes, but the depression. Where is there a documented diagnosis of depression in these records? Dr. Hughes rifled through the papers. It's not clearly noted, but given the situation. So you're diagnosing a man you've never encountered with a condition that his medical records don't reflect, using this fictional condition to question his mental competency? I'm offering a professional viewpoint based on nothing, Thomas stated. No further questions. Palmer looked rattled. He called a neighbor who mentioned Grandpa seemed withdrawn in his later years and a distant relative who claimed Grandpa once expressed a desire for Margaret to visit more. Neither of these testimonies bolstered their case. Then it was our turn. Thomas brought in Judge Andrew Mitchell, who had served alongside Grandpa on the Supreme Court. Judge Mitchell, you collaborated with Judge Ellington for over 20 years. Did you witness any decline in his mental faculties? Absolutely not. Judge Mitchell declared with determination. William maintained his sharpness right to the bitter end. We regularly shared lunches, delving into intricate legal concepts and debating ongoing cases. His intellect remained crystal clear at 87, just as it was at 60. Did he talk about his estate plans? Indeed. He informed me that Aubrey was to inherit everything, claiming she deserved it for her years of dedication. He was unequivocal, no gray areas, no pressure, just a father ensuring that his devoted child was taken care of. Thomas brought in 3 additional witnesses, all close friends, who testified unanimously to Grandpa's mental acuity. They all confirmed he openly deliberated over his will and acted with full intention. Then Thomas presented the attorney responsible for drafting Grandpa's will, Margaret Chen, who had served as his estate advisor for 3 decades. Miss Chen walked us through the process of crafting Judge Ellington's final will. He reached out to me 2 years before his passing, wanting to revisit everything. We met several times, and he was meticulously clear. He wanted Aubrey as the sole heir and wished to end Margaret's monthly allowance. Anticipating potential disputes, he included a clause that affirmed his sound judgment and clear intentions. Did he seem confused or pressured? Absolutely not. He was systematic, providing documentation to back his choices. He sought no ambiguities. What kind of documentation did he present? Records of financial support extended to Margaret over the years, along with calendars detailing his visit frequency. He wanted to ensure clarity should it go to court. Palmer had nothing to counter on cross-examination. Margaret Chin stood resolute. As the court adjourned for the day, our eyes met, and my mother quickly averted her gaze. Good. She needed to feel uneasy. Tomorrow, I would testify. Finally, I would express everything I had longed to say for 31 years, under oath, in front of a judge who recognized the truth. What do you think will transpire when Aubrey takes the stand? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. I woke up early, my nerves buzzing, not from fear, but from excitement. Today was the day I'd finally reveal my truth, and they'd have to listen under oath, in front of a judge who understood my perspective. I chose my outfit with care, a navy suit, minimalistic jewelry, hair neatly tied back, professional and credible, someone deserving of respect. Thomas met me at the courthouse. You ready? More than ready, I replied. Just speak the truth, and don't let Palmer rattle you. I grinned. I prosecute criminals for a living, Thomas. I can handle aggressive questioning. Fair enough, he laughed. Let's go. The courtroom filled rapidly as word of Grandpa's well-known reputation spread, stirring curiosity. Judge Grayson took his seat on the bench. Mr. Goldstein, please call your next witness. Thomas rose. The defense calls Aubrey Morrison. As I stepped onto the stand, I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. Finally, Thomas began gently. Aubrey, please tell the court about your childhood. I inhaled deeply. I was born when my mother was just 18. She and my father decided they weren't ready for parenthood. When I was 3 months old, they brought me to my grandparents. What was intended as a temporary stay turned permanent. They left and seldom returned. How often did they visit? When I was younger, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. As I entered my teens, it dwindled to twice a year, if I was lucky, Christmas and occasionally my birthday. My father was even less frequent. How did that impact you? I learned quickly that I couldn't rely on them. But my grandparents were always present. They attended every event, school plays, soccer matches, debate competitions. They helped with my homework, taught me how to cook, and took me to museums. They acted as my parents in every meaningful aspect. Did Margaret and Scott contribute financially? No. My grandparents covered all expenses, clothes, school supplies, college tuition, law school, it was all on them. Margaret and Scott took money from my grandfather but never gave anything in return. Throughout my testimony, Thomas guided me through every significant moment of my childhood, each missed event, each unfulfilled promise, every unanswered call, including that Christmas when Margaret spent her time on her phone instead of with family. I kept my tone steady and factual, seeking no sympathy, but establishing a clear pattern. When your grandmother passed away, what occurred? I took a semester off college to be with my grandfather since he was heartbroken after 60 years of marriage. I couldn't leave him alone. Did your mother assist? She attended the funeral but left immediately afterward. There was no support with arrangements, nor did she check in on him afterward. I moved back home for 6 months to ensure he was okay, and our bond grew stronger. I called him daily and visited every Sunday for dinner. Upon his retirement, we spent even more time together. He guided me in my career and taught me all about the law. He was both my grandfather and my best friend. My voice wavered slightly, so I cleared my throat. When did you find out about the will? At the reading, a week after he passed, I was stunned. I expected personal belongings, but I had no idea he had amassed so much wealth or that he intended to leave it all to me. Had you ever discussed the will with him? Never. He never shared his intentions with me. I believe he wished for me to love him selflessly, and that's exactly what I did. How would you respond to claims that you exerted control over him? I locked eyes with my mother. I dedicated 30 years to being there for him. Manipulation was never in my playbook. I truly loved him. There's a distinct difference. Thomas settled into his seat. Next up was Palmer with his intense questioning. He rose slowly, that familiar look of someone convinced they've found their hook. Ms. Morrison, you mentioned that you seldom saw your parents, but couldn't you have made more effort or tried harder? I replied calmly, I was a child for the majority of that time. Kids don't set up visits, parents do. As I grew older, I came to see they simply weren't interested. They reached out only when they needed money or showed up when it suited them. I stopped pursuing people who had no interest in being found. Palmer was pacing now. You portray yourself as very devoted. Isn't it possible you actually isolated your grandfather from his daughter to make yourself essential so he would leave you his fortune? I didn't need to create isolation, they did that themselves. My grandfather made his choices based on who genuinely showed up for him. You were ambitious, law school, a prosecutor, all thanks to his support and connections. Didn't you use him to boost your career? I kept my face impassive, despite the anger brewing inside me. My grandfather guided me because he genuinely cared, he took pride in my achievements, and seeing me thrive brought him happiness. That's not manipulation, that's family. Palmer tried various angles, accusing me of poisoning Grandpa's mind against Margaret, claiming I deliberately kept her away, suggesting I persuaded Grandpa to sever ties with her. I dismissed every insinuation with calm, factual replies. Isn't it true you financially gained from your relationship with him? Palmer pressed. How so? He funded your education, your living costs, everything. Yes, because I was his granddaughter, and he wanted to support me. Just like he handed my mother over $800,000 over 2 decades. The contrast? I was present in his life, not just taking his money. I offered him my time, my love, my companionship. What did she provide? Palmer shouted an objection, argumentative. Sustained. Judge Grayson responded. But the point had landed. Palmer attempted to regain direction. Let's discuss his last year. You visited often. Some might say excessively. Were you just ensuring his mental state was stable, making sure he didn't alter the will? I visited because I loved him and he was lonely. If I had cared about the will, I would have asked about it, but I never did. He made his choices independently. How convenient, Palmer scoffed. Miss Morrison, do you really think you were unaware of what you would inherit? That you spent years setting yourself up for this moment? I leaned in slightly. Mr. Palmer, I cherished my grandfather for years. If I had been motivated by inheritance, I wasted precious time. I could have been amassing my own fortune instead of having weekly dinners with an elderly man, but I chose him because he was invaluable, something your clients would never grasp. Palmer's expression soured. No further inquiries, he declared. I left the stand and returned to my place. Thomas leaned over and said, "You were outstanding." I nodded. My focus on my mother, who was in tears, whether it was genuine remorse or realization of defeat, was hard to decipher with Margaret. Judge Grayson surveyed both lawyers. Any additional matters? Thomas stood. I have one last piece of evidence, Your Honor. He projected images on the screen, photos from my youth. Grandpa cheering at my soccer matches. Grandma at recitals. Me and Grandpa at graduations. Each pivotal moment captured. Notice who's missing, Thomas pointed out. Margaret and Scott Morrison. Not by exclusion, but by their own choice not to attend. Then came the financial documents. Every payment to Margaret, every excuse for needing more money, every broken promise to visit. The proof was overwhelming. Judge Grayson reviewed everything meticulously. "I've seen sufficient evidence," he finally stated. "We'll take a recess until tomorrow for closing arguments and the ruling." As we stepped out, I felt a bit lighter. I had said everything that mattered. The truth was on the table. Now, we awaited justice. Closing arguments were slated for 9 a.m. I hardly slept, not from anxiety, but exhilaration. This was nearing its end. Either way, by tomorrow, I'd discover if Grandpa's wishes would be upheld or if my parents would manipulate the narrative. The courtroom buzzed with spectators. Estate disputes aren't often this captivating. A notable judge, a prosecutorial granddaughter, and decades of family turmoil suddenly drew a crowd. Judge Grayson took his position promptly. "Mr. Palmer, it's your turn for closing remarks." Palmer rose and began his final plea. He spoke about the bonds of blood being stronger than water, how Margaret was Grandpa's child deserving of consideration, and how I was merely the granddaughter, as if love and loyalty held less weight due to generational disparities. Judge Ellington found himself engulfed in deep sorrow. Palmer contended that he had recently endured the loss of his wife of 60 years. He was in a vulnerable state, struggling with depression and open to manipulation. The defendant seized this opportunity, cutting him off from his daughter and establishing herself as his only caregiver. She led him to believe that she was the sole person who cared for him. This will does not genuinely represent Judge Ellington's true intentions. Instead, it's a clear outcome of Aubrey Morrison's strategic plan to claim his fortune. Palmer passionately elaborated for 20 minutes, weaving a narrative that, while lacking in factual support, could convince anyone unaware of the details. Once Thomas finished, he rose calmly. "Your Honor, this is simple," he began. Judge Ellington was a man of integrity who made deliberate choices all his life. His will reflects that same wisdom, rewarding love and loyalty, not deceit. He walked the judge through the evidence, Diane's financial negligence, testimony proving Judge Ellington's sound mind, and records of the Morrisons' absence versus Aubrey's daily care. "That's not manipulation," Thomas said. "That's devotion." Then, boldly, he addressed the judge directly. "You knew Judge Ellington. Was he a man easily swayed, or guided by principle and observation?" The judge called a recess. 30 tense minutes later, the verdict came. "The evidence shows Judge Ellington acted with full capacity," Judge Grayson ruled. "His will was deliberate and free of influence. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed." Diane sobbed. Scott cursed. "The will stands," the judge continued, "and the plaintiffs will cover the defendant's legal fees." The gavel fell. It was over. Grandpa's wishes were honored, and my parents' greed came at their own expense. Thomas extended his hand. "Congratulations, Aubrey." I nodded, too emotional to speak. As we packed up, my mother approached, tears streaking her face. "Aubrey, please, can we talk?" she begged. I met her gaze. She looked broken, older than her years, but pity was all I felt. "There's nothing to discuss, Margaret," I said. "You're not my mother. Grace and Thomas earned that title by being there. You just took from Grandpa, and here you are again." "Please," she whispered, "I made mistakes." "No," I replied. "You made choices. 31 years of them." When she reached for me, I stepped back. "Don't contact me again. We've been done since I was 3 months old. This just makes it official." As I walked out with Thomas, I heard her sobs and Scott's angry voice behind me, but I didn't look back. For the first time, I felt free of their neglect, free to live as Grandpa taught me. Love is shown through presence, not blood. I drove straight to Grandpa's grave, tulips blooming beside Grandma's stone. "We won," I whispered. "They tried to rewrite our story, but truth prevailed." The wind stirred gently, as if he answered. "I promised to honor their legacy and plant new tulips each spring, a symbol that love endures." Months later, life found a new rhythm, work, peace, and purpose. Then one Saturday, the doorbell rang. A woman in her 60s stood outside. "Aubrey Morrison," she asked. "I'm Patricia Caldwell, your grandfather's neighbor." She handed me an envelope. Inside were letters, all in Grandpa's handwriting, addressed to Margaret but never sent. The first began, "Dear Margaret, Aubrey had her dance recital today. She kept looking for you in the audience, her face falling when you weren't there. How many more times must I see her heartbreak because you can't be bothered to show up?" As I read the letters, each revealed Grandpa's heartbreak over Margaret's absence, her broken promises, and his struggle between loving his daughter and recognizing her failings. One, written 2 years before his passing, stood out. He had given Margaret over $600,000, realizing it only enabled her dependence, yet he continued modest support out of love. Most importantly, he cherished me, Aubrey, as the true gift, bringing him purpose after my mother's death. Tears streamed as Patricia reminded me. He never stopped hoping for Margaret to change, though he knew she wouldn't. I called Thomas. The letters confirmed everything from the trial, but more personally. Should I show them to Margaret? Thomas wisely said no, her guilt was hers, not mine. I kept the letters, a testament to Grandpa's love, struggles, and choices. A week later, Judge Grayson affirmed the same. Grandpa's decisions reflected truth, not emotion, and he never allowed guilt to cloud judgment. That night, I began drafting my own will, inspired by his wisdom. At 31, I drafted my will, leaving everything to charities Grandpa had supported, with nothing to Margaret or Scott, not out of spite, but because they'd already taken enough. I included a posthumous letter explaining my choices, ensuring future generations understood they were principled, not vengeful. Life moved on. I was promoted to senior prosecutor, Sunday dinners continued with friends, and gradually I reclaimed my identity. A year after the verdict, I was offered a judgeship at 33, among the youngest in the state. During confirmation, I defended my family lawsuit, emphasizing that true family values are shown through presence and love, not biology. My appointment was confirmed, and on my first day on the bench, I wore Grandpa's oversized robe, feeling him beside me. My inaugural case involved a custody battle, and I ruled joint custody with counseling and a child advocate, stressing that children remember who was truly there for them. I applied the same principles to every ruling. Presence matters, consistency counts, and biology alone doesn't guarantee love. 6 months in, I recused myself from an estate case mirroring my own experience, advising the attorneys to focus on consistent care over blood ties. The caregiver ultimately prevailed, proving that actions and presence truly matter. Over the years, I built a reputation as a fair, resolute judge who prioritized honesty, evidence, and the vulnerable. 3 years into my judgeship, Scott called about Margaret's failing health. I refused to visit, saying her choices, not her illness, defined our relationship. 5 years in, upon her death, I ignored notifications, skipped the funeral, and felt no guilt. She had never been my mother. 6 months later, I was nominated to the state Supreme Court at 38. During confirmation, I explained that motherhood is earned through action, not biology, honoring those who truly raised me. Confirmed as Justice Aubrey Morrison, I shaped laws on parental rights, elder abuse, and estates, emphasizing that parental rights must be earned through consistent care. 2 years in, Scott's death brought me Margaret's wedding ring, which I tucked away, unmoved. A decade after Grandpa's passing, I was invited to speak at a law school about my career and Supreme Court role. I agreed to speak at the law school, but as I prepared, I realized my message wasn't about my career, it was about family, love, and the difference between biology and belonging. The auditorium overflowed with eager students. At the podium, I said, "I'm Justice Aubrey Morrison, serving in my grandfather's former position. But today, I want to tell you who truly raised me." I shared my story, abandoned as an infant, embraced by grandparents who chose me, and the lesson that family is built through commitment, not blood. I spoke of inheritance earned through 31 years of presence, proving love outweighed biology. I told them success isn't just professional achievement, it's integrity, steadfast presence, and honoring those who believe in you. Grandpa wanted me to use his gifts for impact, not wealth, so I devoted myself to public service, standing up for the vulnerable and holding people accountable. The speech earned a standing ovation. Students shared their own family struggles, and I explained that acceptance, not forced peace, is key. You build your own family of those who truly show up. 15 years after Grandpa's passing, I found a photo from my 8th birthday with him and Grandma, frosting covered and laughing. I keep it on my desk as a reminder of real roots, not Margaret and Scott, who gave me biology, but Helen and Thomas Ellison, who gave me love, guidance, and presence. I have no regrets. A reconciliation with absent parents requires mutual desire, which they never had. I honor my grandfather's wishes and choose presence over biology. As Justice Aubrey Morrison, I influence thousands, protect children and the vulnerable, and take pride that those who truly raised me would be proud, not for my title, but because I remained true to myself. Grandpa's legacy wasn't wealth, it was the lesson that love is action, family is chosen through commitment, and showing up consistently is the greatest gift. That's not tragedy, that's justice, love, and truth.